keep up, well, I should be introducing myself. My name is Dr. Monique Swift. I'm sorry. Dr. Monique Swift, and I'm a psychologist. I have a small private practice that I operate in Union County, New Jersey. But the vast majority of my work is in the area of trauma. I do consulting work in the area of trauma, helping organizations to become trauma informed, and most specifically, especially recently, racial trauma, helping people kind of understand and navigate the waters of racial trauma, healing, and that type of thing, specifically with Black people. So that's kind of my niche, and so some of that you'll probably hear coming out as we talk today. I want to kind of start off, here's my clicker. Allow me to say too, when I was asked to do this presentation, she mentioned that Dr. Brown wanted me to do a presentation to kind of help people as we're navigating this post-COVID, if we want to consider ourselves post-COVID waters, right? With all that has happened to our students, teachers, and so forth. And I want to say when it comes to being trauma-informed, there really is no difference. This presentation would be the same if it was pre-COVID as it is before COVID, after COVID, right? So I just want to kind of put that out front. You know, when it comes to COVID, one of the things that we saw was that, particularly with Black people, that the disparities that happened, right? Oh my gosh, Black people are getting hit more. But it wasn't long before we realized that it wasn't that Black people were so susceptible to COVID, it was that the extant conditions that Black people had prior to COVID created a lot of vulnerability, right? And so I kind of feel like I see the same things with the school system, right? So I want to kind of start off today with a little metaphor, if I can. That it says, a while ago, a crack appeared on the Joneses' bedroom wall. They called in a professional who replaced the plaster around the crack and repainted the wall. But the crack reappeared not long after that. They called the painter back again. He repaired the crack and he repainted the wall. Everything looked fine until about a couple of months later when the crack came back. And this time it brought its aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, and nephews. The Joneses called in another professional, and he gave the verdict. The crack in the wall were due to a much deeper problem. They were experiencing a shifting foundation. He told them that until they stabilized their foundation, they would forever be repairing cracks in the walls. Now, I started with this particular metaphor because I have a lot of, I guess, thoughts and ideas about the school system, how we're operating, and some of the flaws, and so forth and so on. And I can probably stand up here and, you know, talk about a lot of grandiose ideas and overhauls that need to happen in order to make a better environment for our students. But quite honestly, you and I think both know that we're not ready for that, right? That's not really happening. So what I thought about is it might be more useful to people to really come up with some very practical ideas and strategies that can be employed within the system that we currently have. And so that's where I'm kind of living with the presentation today. Okay? So we're going to talk about, you know, a trauma-informed design, making our schools healing environments. And as I mentioned earlier, that's kind of where I'm focusing on. We want to help make the schools, we know the trauma is there, right? That's not rocket science. We know that our students are coming in with a lot of burdens, coming from a lot of different experiences and injuries, harms, and traumas in their personal lives, in their community, and so forth. And so when they come into the schools, we want to be intentional about creating an environment that is healing for them. And so what is a trauma-informed environment? A trauma-informed environment, environmental design is a prerequisite for mitigating existing trauma. So that's key. When we're talking about being trauma-informed, we're not talking about necessarily like preventing trauma, though that can be a part of it. But the bigger piece, the bigger thrust of being trauma-informed is about not exacerbating, right, or reactivating the trauma that is already there, right? So we want to avert re-traumatizing. In many of our school buildings, you come into them, and just coming into the buildings is trauma, right? They're not warm, they're not welcoming. And so we want to, if we're being trauma-informed, we want to be sure that we're functioning in a way that's going to avert re-stimulating the trauma that they've already come in with. The other part of being trauma informed is about putting people on the pathway to healing. So that's important. So we don't want to just not aggravate what's already there. We also want to create a condition wherein they can heal. Okay? So that's the big piece about a trauma-informed environment. So a trauma-informed design, it recognizes that we're linked to our environment, and it considers how that physical environment affects our attitude, mood, and behavior, right? Being very intentional about creating that design. No, we live in environments. Coming into this space today, you felt something. You may not have been aware of it, but it created something. I know when I came in, I was like, it feels really big. I wanted a smaller space, especially looking at the crowd, right? And so it feels a little, impersonal. So nonetheless, we function and we live in environments, and whether we're intentional about it or not, our environment is always speaking to us, right? And so when we're trying to create trauma-informed design, we have to be aware that attitudes, moods, behaviors are impacted by our environments. If you think about it, you can think about what it feels like when you walk into a bank, let's say, right? When you walk into a bank, it's pretty sterile, right? It is designed in such a way where you know where not to walk. They don't even have to put a sign, right? You know where you can't go, you know where you can go. They have it, the path kind of mapped out for you. You know you're under surveillance. So you might, when you walk into a bank, feel a little bit of edge. In comparison to maybe going into a park, right? You walk into a park, it's like the park is wide open, it's green, it's calm, it welcomes you, it doesn't tell you no, it just envelops you, right? And so if you think about that, what you want to create is a feeling like that when your students walk into your schools, your classrooms, even your homes as parents, right? These are some of the things we might want to consider. A trauma-informed environment also, it facilitates affect regulation and it builds resilience, right? If we're intentional and good about designing our environment, we'll find that it helps to reduce stress, right? It also will facilitate coping, and we'll kind of get into that as we get into some more specific strategies. And so finally, also a trauma-informed environment is incompatible with trauma. It's incompatible. What do I mean by that? It's incompatible with trauma. If we understand trauma is really, it's physiological, right? It is an activation of sympathetic nervous system. And if we remember back from school, right, the sympathetic nervous system gets your heart racing, your palms sweaty, your blood rushing through all of this stuff happens, but it's a survival response, right? And so when we are experiencing trauma, it activates that sympathetic nervous system. But what we want to do is create environments that activate our parasympathetic nervous system. That's the part of our nervous system that brings us down from that anxious space, right? That's the part of our nervous system that allows us to relax, right? And so that's what we're thinking of. If we're stimulating parasympathetic function, we are canceling out sympathetic function, right? Just by virtue of the fact that that's what we're doing. Whenever you're stimulating parasympathetic function, you cannot be traumatized, you cannot be anxious if you're in that parasympathetic place. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the type of environment that we're trying to create here. We're trying to create an environment that's incompatible with the trauma. And so I'm going to walk us through, I think, a pretty easy way of doing that, right? And so I've organized the next several slides around the fact that a trauma-informed environment needs to be multi-sensory, right? It should be multi-sensory. If you just consider all of the senses, you'll probably, even if you forget everything that I said here today, if you just remember this one piece, that it's multi-sensory, and you think about each of the senses and you're deliberate and intentional about speaking to those senses, you will create a trauma-informed environment, right? So I'm gonna go through each one. The first one is a visual environment. The first one is a visual environment that we should be intentional about the visual presentation of your space, right? And so visual images should add visual interest, right? It should be captivating. When you walk into a school building, when you walk into a classroom, your home, bedroom, whatever it might be, maybe you can add some visual interest to your space, right? Maybe pictures, things that people can kind of gaze at, and allowing them to kind of come down from. I included some examples here of just visual interest, right? Things that would kind of pull you in and allow you to just kind of maybe zone out while you're looking at something, and just, maybe abstract art that also you can project your own stuff onto, and look at that face and say, oh my God, they're so angry. Or wow, that speaks to me as somebody being really confused, or whatever it might be, right? Those pictures that have kind of two, what do you call them? I forgot what you call those pictures that have two pictures in the picture. Somebody knows here, right? So pictures like this can, scatter them around. That can be a way to stimulate visual interest, right? This is another example. This is in a school building also, where, painting a mural on a wall can really kind of, you go by and it just kind of gives you some sort of feeling. Another, thing for a visual environment, that visual images should reflect and reinforce the student's sense of personal identity. And this is really important. I don't know about you, but I've certainly gone into places where I feel like I'm not honored here, right? I've gone into restaurants where they have all this, the old pictures, historical pictures on the wall, and every face is white. And every face looks like it's dated from, slavery or something, and I don't feel a part of that space. And I feel alienated in that space, right? And so we want to take that into consideration. Who is in your room? And if they're in your room, they should be able to see themselves reflected in the space in their room. Now, these are some snippets, an example of a colleague of mine, Dr. Christopher Faber Muhammad. He's an artist, and these are some of the just pictures of paintings that he has done in a school. Actually, this one was on the West Coast, right? And so clearly you can see who's in that school just by looking at those pictures, right? And then not only do these students walk and see reflections of themselves, but they're seeing certain words. I see restorative justice. I see citizenship, kindness, right? Dismantling systemic racism and white supremacy. Like, if you're exposing these, young people to these images, they speak to you. They really speak to you and have a very positive effect. So taking into consideration the culture, who is in the space, is really important when you're creating a trauma-informed space. Also, prompt social emotional learning as well, right? And so if, for example, you've done a lesson with the student, a counselor or so forth has done a lesson with the student around deep breathing or around stress or whatever it might be, there also should be some prompts around the space that allow them, this one's mindfulness, right? That kind of prompt them that they were taught. Now this is the reminder, right? That if wherever I look, I see mindfulness. Oh yes, I got a little ticked off, but I'm going to do my mindfulness exercises that I know. So this is another way that you can create a space that, that is speaking to the student from a trauma-informed perspective. So also consider the use of color, words, and symbolism. Now, color, as much as we, I think we don't really appreciate or realize, but color, it evokes emotion. It evokes emotion, right? When you see red, right? It's alerting, sometimes it's alarming. It kind of symbolizes love as well. It evokes emotion from you. So you want to be deliberate about using certain colors. Oranges are quite warm. Yellow, that's a happy color. It evokes happy feelings, right? Red, what are blues? Blues tend to be very calming, right? And so be intentional about using colors to evoke the emotions that you want to create in your space. And then also using words. Not just, I have words in my therapy office. Not just, you want to use positive words, right? You want to use words that are affirming for students. to look at and read. And so if on the wall, just the word courageous or love or whatever it might be, those words have power. I'm reminded of it was a Japanese scientist who did a experiment with rice. I don't know if anybody heard of that one. He did an experiment with rice. I actually tried to do it, it didn't work for me. But he put rice in two different jars. And one jar he spoke to and he said very affirming things. I love you, and talked in very beautiful tones, and you're beautiful, and just very positive things. The other one he yelled at and said very disparaging, you're ugly, you're stupid, and very nasty negative words from other. And what he found is the one that he said very negative things to fermented faster and more than the other. I tried it and it didn't work for me. However, there is literature out there that supports this idea of words having power. So we want to use those words. Words have energy, they have vibration, right? So we want to use that. Symbolism as well. You can display a whole narrative in just one picture. It can be very, very powerful. So you want to use symbolism. So these are some examples of, just words and affirmations, proverbs that can say something so powerful in just a short little phrase, right? And so this, for example, this symbol, these are Adinkra symbols, if you're not familiar. This one, I don't know all of them, I don't remember all of them, is in constant. And essentially it represents a chain link, and it's supposed to represent unity. And the connectedness of human beings together, right? And so if a student knows what this symbol stands for, just upon seeing it, you're stimulating the idea of unity in the mind of that student, right? Without ever saying anything. It can be very powerful. Okay, also, pictures of animals and nature can be very, very common. Right, can be very grounding when you have pictures of animals and nature. And so this is an example of a classroom. You see here the whole wall was painted, or at least a portion of the wall, was painted in a nature scene. Feels a lot different than if that wall was just plain white, right? Or a cinder block or what have you. It feels a lot different. Right? This is some wall tapestries, and I put this here because I wanted us to see that this is not far-fetched. Like, we can kind of decorate a whole wall without going through the process of having to get permission because it's going to alter the building or whatever, all of that. You can take it up, you can put it down, and it's very cheap, right? So tapestries are something that you can just do, very easy to do, and it really can change the ambiance of a space. Any questions about the visual environment before we move on? So I want to move to the auditory environment. I kind of really want to. So auditory environment, auditory cues can facilitate attention and impact mood as well, right? So we want to pay attention to that. We want to use calming sounds instead of harsh tones. So I know when I was in school, and I feel like it's probably still the case, it's been a while since I've been in school, but do they still use that arrogant bell? They do?
Some places, I was in 2 buildings this week, and when the period ended, music started.
Come on now.
Music started.
Exactly.
And I've been in this building numerous times, and it's not always the same music. Sometimes it's jazz, sometimes it's pop. This was Spanish Heritage Month.
Okay. So they did. I love it. I love it.
And when the music stops, you should be where you're supposed to be.
That's very progressive. And that's trauma informed, right? As human beings, we are wired for sound, right? And certain sounds that are alarming, alerting, it stimulates sympathetic function. It causes us to be anxious and so forth.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I was going to say, I do frequency healing, right? So it's all about music.
Come on now.
It's all about sound, it's all about that. And it's crazy how much it's affects us. I see you kind of sound a little.
Yes.
I know you know. But it's real, guys. Like, everything has a frequency, everything has hertz. We are all frequency and energy. So this is a great way to be able to get through. I'll see you.
My sister knows. Right, exactly. So, I mean, so we can be creative and turn that horrible buzzer off and use certain sounds that can be, stimulating and kind of, calming to the nervous system rather than riling it up. So I like that idea, what you said, and I did, now that you mentioned, my little singing bowls and stuff. Are we familiar with singing bowls? Yes, right? Aren't they wonderful? So this is supposed to be an F key. It's a very smooth sound, and you can get different size bowls and so forth. Nothing in the bowl. I love it, just by creating a vibration. And right, and so what do we do as teachers when the students are kind of unruly, they're making a lot of noise, what do? We yell, right? We raise our voice. Be quiet, I want your attention. But what if you just, that would get their attention. It really would, right? And there's different ways that you can kind of do this. This is a tongue drum. We're familiar with tongue drum? So I use these in my presentations sometimes. Beautiful, right? So just within this room, just hearing a sound that is pleasant, it creates something, right? And so we want to take that into consideration. I know for me, this is something I keep on my desk. It's a chime. And when I'm feeling, there'll be times I'm sitting at my desk and I realize, oh, my shoulders are at my ears, I'm tense, I'm stressed, I'm working hard. And something that I devised for me as a way to just kind of stimulate my parasympathetic function and take it down, this one is my favorite key. I'll just hit that, and within seconds, I just listen to the sound and allow my body to just melt. And by the time it's over, my shoulders have dropped, and when I can no longer hear the sound, then I'm like, okay, back to work. And I can literally feel the tension kind of ease away. Like, so I use certain things that can be, that can help me like that. And these things we can use in the classroom with our students as well, right? As my sister mentioned, the Hertz tone, right? In the classroom, you can use sound. It's not working. Well, it was embedded, but it is embedded. It worked earlier. Why is my sound not working? Okay, well, nonetheless, we can use sound in the classroom, in the school, to create some sort of, to create ambiance. You can even just have it just in the room playing all the time. The 432 hertz. Also, the 444 hertz have been known, scientifically proven, to reduce blood pressure, right? To reduce the heart rate with just tone. And it's not a distracting tone, right? It's not something that will compete with you if you're trying to speak to a student or what have you. It's not distracting. It's just there in the background. It's playing, and your body is responding to it. You don't have to pay attention. You are already responding to it. Did you want to say anything more?
Well, what I can say is each frequency is gone with even the sound holes. Like she was saying, different sound holes. Like each one is connected with our chakras. I don't know if you guys know about chakras, right? But to that, imagine it's already in tune with our body. So if we're already alerting it or calming it using this and knowing that interaction, it's amazing what we can do and how we can actually take control of our body and our emotions. And it also helps us release a lot, which is what we need to do because just like you said, the sympathetic and the
Thank you for sharing that. It's encouraging to hear that people are actually, this is happening, right, in our school. Do you work in the schools with your therapy? Or?
No, I'm a holistic healer. I work with all the nonprofit organizations around, and basically anything that has to do with trauma, I'm involved in. Because this is where it's at.
Indeed.
It's natural healing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, sir? This one I got from a conference. I think this one I got from a conference. Yes, I believe I got this one from a conference. This I ordered on Amazon. So I have a little one that I purchased when I was in Puerto Rico, and it's small. So I wanted something bigger, a little more resonant, and this one is that. And this I ordered off of some healing site. Yeah, just pretty much ordered them. Yeah, you can get the singing bowls also right there on the internet. They're quite popular now. So also communication, right? Because our voices are part of the auditory environment, right? It's you can't get around that. We want to try to speak in calm tones and because that really does help to regulate a dysregulated student. I don't know about you all. I have one of my daughter is here. But if you have children, when you call them by their name, they know, right? Immediately. Well, sometimes I'll call them, I thought you were mad. I'll say something that they weren't anticipating. I thought you were angry. They listen to our tone. They right? Our tone means something. So we want to kind of be, mindful of that and use tones that are going to speak healing, that are going to speak, positivity to them, particularly when you use their name, right? There's nothing sweeter to a person's ears than the sound of their own name. And so using voice inflections to draw people in, engage people, and making trauma-informed language, right? What they hear on a daily basis, making that part of your daily vernacular. So we're talking about healing. We're using the word self-care, right? Stress, they should know about stress and the stress continuum, eustress, distress, right? Knowing your zone, and obviously there's some SEL that will go into this, but using these words, having them to hear, listen to these words is a really important part of the auditory environment. There are no questions about that. All right, now, olfaction. How in the world do we do this, right? We know what to do with sound, what to do with vision, but how do we incorporate olfaction? Now, olfaction, our sense of smell, is the only sense that is directly connected to the brain, right? And because it does have an immediate impact on mood and mental alertness. So we don't want to omit paying attention to this particular sense that we have. We want to include that as well. And so in our environment, we don't just have what we see and what we hear, we also have what we smell, right? What does your environment smell like? I've been in some classrooms. They don't often smell pleasant, right? But we should be intentional about making them, yes. What are you gonna?
I noticed that quite a few people now use the remote with the users. But you know what I saw a teacher, I walked in her room, not a teacher, school social worker. I walked in her office one day, I was like, oh, it's near winter time. That smells good, it's winter green. Well, it's a candle she has, but it's on a coffee one.
Okay.
So, you have your, those Bath and Body Works candles. Now, she had a brand new candle up there, it's a small one, it's got about $2. But, those Bath and Body Works ones, they go down and then you can't light them anymore. I went and found my little coffee one from every time I come in the morning, the first thing I do is put that on because it warms it and all day long. Every time I come in
You're smelling. Isn't it? And it makes a difference, right? It really does. Nice idea. Thank you for that. Absolutely.
You can find a coffee warmer. You can put those over, put them on top, and it melts the wax.
Perfect, right? So like we can't really use candles more than likely in our schools, right? That's a fire hazard, or incense you can't really use, but you can use plugins. You can use a coffee pot, right? And then you can also use, you mentioned diffusers, right? Essential oils. And you can put it in a diffuser, and it really can light up a room. And so I have a few essential oils here. And I'd like to, Derek, can you help me please? I don't know if this would bother anyone, if anyone could, at least 3 of you, do just one. Can we, okay, good, we have volunteers. So put just 1 drop. Just know which one you put if you could remember. Don't look at it. And then just kind of rub it in your hand. Rub it in your hand and just kind of close your eyes and bring it in and just pay attention to what comes up, what feeling comes up. Does any feeling come up for you? And if so, what? Anybody registered any feeling yet? Relax. Peaceful. Okay. Anyone else? My brother here didn't get, I don't know if you can. Warmth. Wow. Okay, listen to the words that are coming up. Relax, warmth, gratitude. Anything else? Serene. Dira, brother here didn't get. Now, I don't know which ones that you have, but of course, different essential oils can evoke different responses, right? And so lavender is one that I have there. And lavender, we're pretty much familiar with lavender. It is calming, relaxing. Lemon is not one of the ones I have, but lemon is very, it stimulates, right? It creates focus and attention. And so if you have students who they're about to go into a test, maybe they're a little anxious or what have you, or maybe they're not anxious at all, just drop a little drop of essential oil in them and it'll just kind of stimulate their minds and get them going, right? Orange is good for germ control. Also, not for nothing, people who are concerned about COVID and even any other random things that are going on, they're essential oils. I used during COVID thieves. When I was still seeing clients initially, I would put in a diffuser in my office. Thieves is a blend of essential oils that is very potent, very antimicrobial, antibacterial, and it was called Thieves because the story that I understand is that during the bubonic plague, it was the same blend that was used by thieves who wanted to go in and steal after someone died from the plague. They wanted to go in their house and steal something. So they would use this particular blend in order to keep themselves, free of whatever was in the air. So that's something that you can even use if you're concerned. And, COVID's not the only thing going around, right? So just have that going in your room. And Thieves actually smells very good. It has like a cinnamony clove type of a cakey smell to it, if that makes sense. If you can imagine those smells together. And then the others, peppermint was one I had here. That some of you may have gotten peppermint, and that's for mental focus and so forth and so on. Cinnamon was another one. I'm wondering if you got cinnamon. You said, you can kind of smell it. You said that tends to give you kind of a warm feeling. It helps to reduce depression and anxiety, right? So these are some, and this is, of course, not an exhaustive list. We can go on and on and on with that. So that's olfaction. The next one I want to look at is tactile, right? Very important. Somatosensory channels are powerful portals to healing and relaxation, right? So this is really important, tactile. Now, I know sometimes for some people, touch is a bad word to use in school. You're never supposed to touch the children. Honestly, I take issue with that. I do recognize and appreciate, however, the fact that some children don't want to be touched. For some children, it's triggering to be touched, or even for people to get into their space. But that goes to the point of knowing who you have, right? We should know those that we interact with enough to be able to understand that about them. But where you can, where it is okay, touch can be very powerful, especially when a student is activated, when a student is, dysregulated at that moment. Touch can help to bring them right down. But also touch can be used in the classroom, squeezy balls, fidget objects, and soft objects. You can just put them on the desk. For some of the presentations that I do, we use fidget toys and we just kind of strew them about on the tables, and people just play with them as they're talking, and not for nothing, people think that if a student has something, they're fidgeting with it, they're not paying attention. Thank you. It's not true. Go ahead.
And it's not because that squeezy ball.
Yep.
I got one. I gave one to your principal. I'm constantly, especially in meetings, because I need to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have that little, little pushy.
Oh yeah, the pop. Yeah.
And then go along top of that.
Yes.
My daughter gave me one. She's but she's like, Mom, you need to. I'm like, okay. But
Yeah.
adults need them too.
Absolutely, absolutely, right? And so, like you said, like you're acknowledging, it's not distraction. In fact, when we are manipulating things, it stimulates our frontal lobe. And so that stimulation actually helps us to focus, right? And so for our ADHD students, don't stop them, don't make them sit still and stop them let them fidget, let them focus on something, because it will help them to concentrate. I think your hand was up.
Thinking about something that Haley said about his 3 non-negotiables for equity, and his first was individuality.
Yes.
Recognizing the individual student's needs,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a note taker, so I'm always okay because I got my pen, listening. But some people, they're not processing that
Yeah.
way, so they may need something. But just because I take notes and somebody
Yes.
else squeezes the ball doesn't make either of us right or wrong.
Absolutely.
So just for the teachers, the adults, to have the patience and understanding
Mm-hmm.
that each child's needs differ, and be able to allow it to happen without penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can't sit like this.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And thank you for that. I appreciate that, right? That individuality perspective, and letting people, he gave examples, right? Some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, some people are kinesthetic learners. And so we have to appreciate that everybody kind of has a different mode that they function in, and we want to appeal to that. Well, it's opportunities to color, right? Now, adult coloring is becoming very popular now, right? I have a colleague who did a coloring book. And so opportunities to color can be also really calming, right? It's a tactile experience because you are, to kind of be the motion of going back and forth, that repetitive motion over and over and over, coloring, right? It gives you that tactile experience that can be calming, but it also gives you a visual and an auditory experience as well, right? Because you're seeing something get filled in, you're seeing the color. Remember we said color evokes emotion, right? So that you're getting that stimulation through the emotion of the color, you're getting the stimulation because you're listening to that. I can remember that sound of, I can pull it up in my mind so clearly, that sound of a crayon going across the page. Sometimes they're really waxy and they stick, right? You know that sound, and then sometimes they're a little dry. But so it gives you that same stimulation. This one I did some years back, a presentation in Newark for the staff, and she was a counselor, talked about that she keeps in her office a bowl of rice, not cooked of course, but a bowl of rice, which if you think about it can be really, for a student who's dysregulated, yeah, you stick your hand in that bowl of rice, maybe it feels cool, and maybe you can feel it warming up as you keep your hands in there. You can feel the rice just kind of pouring over your hands. You can play with it. You can do the same thing with sand. So like that tactile experience, again, very relaxing. A weighted blanket. If you're working with multiple students, we don't really want to share blankets, but I threw it in there because it actually can be very calming to have a weighted blanket. Maybe you want to use it at home, right? So that's a suggestion also. Also, using touch to de-escalate, as I kind of mentioned earlier. We are social beings, and touch is a communication. And when you touch someone out of love and care, it speaks to them, right? Just like that. Just like that. There you go. You got it. You see her melting, right? Did it not speak to? It speaks to you. When you touch someone out of love and care, it speaks. And don't think for a second that these students can't feel that. They know when you care. They know, right, what that touch means. So don't be afraid of touch. We want to respect the fact that some people don't want to be touched, but this whole idea you'll get sued if you touch it, that'll take me somewhere else. Proprioception. So we're not just paying attention to and feeling our external environment, but we also want to feel our internal environment, right? We call that proprioception. So here you're talking about mindfulness, so you can kind of pay attention. If you're still and you're focused, you can feel your heartbeat, right? You can feel the pulse that it radiates throughout your body. You can feel the air going in and out of your lungs. You can feel maybe areas of tension, or maybe your stomach is feeling calm, or maybe it's feeling a little upset, whatever it might be, but really sensing your inner environment. Body scans can be helpful to create that as well. Progressive muscle relaxation, and then there are others as well. So that's tactile experience. Oh, also I wanted to make mention in terms of playing with things. I think you mentioned you didn't crystal, but you mentioned the chakras. These are each of the chakra colors, but these are crystals. And crystals, I don't know if we're how familiar we are with crystals, but each crystal has its own kind of energy. Right? And so sometimes I'll just let the crystal, what do I want today? And I don't have to read it in a book. I can. There's so much literature out there about what amethyst, the benefits of amethyst or quartz or whatever, but I just let it speak to me. What is pulling me in today? So I'll just pick up what I want. Sometimes I'll stick it in my bra. I probably should have said that, right? And just kind of feed off the energy. But you can kind of have crystals. You can have a regular stone from the park, right? You don't have to go buy something, but just having that and letting a student hold something, right, like that, and just kind of feel it can be so grounding itself. Right? And again, you don't have to spend anything. They're beautiful. How many rocks did my daughter and I went to Kenya. We just got back Wednesday. And we're attracted to rocks. We took all these different rocks, but there are rocks on the ground that are so beautiful, right? So you don't have to buy them, but just bring them in the classroom and let people hold them and touch them. Now, gustatory, right? So this is the last sense. Now, what do we do with this one, right? Are we going to cook a meal and bring it in the classroom? You could possibly do that too. But a mindful gustatory experience also can be helpful for de-escalating a dysregulated student, right? Give them a mindful gustatory experience. So for that, you can use just water. We have water, right? You could just give them a bottle of water. Hopefully you have that available, right? And then not just for them to kind of guzzle the water, but giving them, I'm after time. 12 o'clock we're supposed to end, right? We could keep, okay. Okay. Okay, I'll try to move quickly, but water, but drinking it mindfully, right? Not just kind of guzzling it, but drinking the water mindfully, slowly, that, letting it go down, or paying attention to how it makes your mouth feel, swallowing it, feeling it go down. How far can you feel it? Where does it stop, right? So just kind of having them do a mindful, if they're escalated, right? To drink water in a mindful way can be very de-escalating. You could do the same thing with hard candy. Maybe a student is really upset about something, and maybe give them a piece of hard candy. Don't bite it, just let it melt on its own. Feel it, pay attention. What's the flavors? How does it feel in your mouth? When that's gone, we'll talk, right? By the time they've done that, they're calm. Yeah. Ice is another thing you can use. Ice, put it in your mouth and let it melt. Maybe you have ice in the teacher's lounge or something, maybe not, but if you have ice available, that can be used that way as well. And so the beauty about all of these senses and operating this way, creating an environment that speaks to students in this way, is that you don't have to recruit the students' attention, right? These are just things that you're doing in the environment that will have an impact, will have an effect subconsciously, right? They don't have to pay attention to it. It'll just happen organically, right? So it's outside of their conscious awareness that, wow, the colors in this room are calming. They don't say that when they come in. They just feel it, right? And so that's the beauty of really creating a trauma-informed environment. And so if you have to go, I understand and I respect that, but with your permission, I'll just try to run through. Okay. So some additional considerations outside of the senses. One of the ones is spatial considerations. And here, I kind of call this staging, right? You want to stage the space, right? And so you want to consider the way the furniture is set up and desks in the classroom, how the desks are situated. I often think that circles or U-shaped configurations tend to work well, right? And so consider the flow and function, the efficiency of the space, right? So if there's a common area where a lot of students have to go, you don't want that area to be cluttered. You want to have a clean, open path to that particular area. Provide spaces for self-regulation in your school, in your classroom, in your home, right? There needs to be spaces where a student can go. There's teaching that goes along with this, of course, but we call them peace corners or safe spaces, calming corners, whatever you want to call them, but having a space where the student has in that space tools. Maybe they have stones, or they have, essential oils, or perhaps they have something with sound if it's not going to be too distracting, or a worksheet that helps them kind of walk through whatever it is that they're dealing with, that they can kind of help to kind of, self kind of resolve whatever it is that's going on for them. So you can put different things there. Also, use natural materials, right? And colors where it's possible, earth tones and so forth. Have plants in the space. Plants are really, plants clean the air. There are some that clean the air. There are plants that just kind of nice to see. Stones, crystals, I mentioned, wood, lighting. You want to pay attention to lighting. A eucalyptus plant is great because it doesn't need a lot of care and it smells wonderful, right? Yeah. And so also, you want to change up the space. I can remember my classrooms in school, like there were some that they changed up the space in the middle of the year, but some you came in and you left that space looking just the way it is. Change it up. Have them come in and it looks a little bit different, right? Bring fresh air when possible. I know it's not always possible. It's not always a window or a window that opens, but where there is, open the window and allow fresh air in. Keep the space neat and clean, right? That's just respectful to people who you're entertaining, number one, right? But also that is part of, having an environment that's trauma-free. You know how the homes that some of our children come from, right? And to kind of come into a space that's also just a mess, we don't want that. Declutter. It's so easy for our classrooms to get cluttered throughout the school year with all the stuff that you're doing. So having regular times to declutter is really important. And then also, so this is an example of a space that I thought that was kind of well organized, spatially. This is like a rec room, library, reading room type of thing. And so you see they have plants in it. The lighting is not direct. It's kind of muted with the blinds, right? It has a common area where students will go, but it has space where you can kind of move around the table and so forth. And it has little clusters where students sit. So I thought that was an example of a space that I think was well ordered in terms of spatially. And, playing with lighting. I forgot I put this in here. This is an idea that you reminded me when you talked about the music, right? That the music goes down when they're focused. But also, if you turn the lights off and let them, if it's reading time, let's say, for example, they all have their own individual lights, that helps them to focus on what they're doing and not be, looking at what's this going on the other side of the classroom. So playing with lighting also can be really helpful to create an environment that's comfortable. Let that darkness come around and let them read with their own personal light.
I walked into a teacher's class yesterday, and it was in the morning. He had gone downstairs, but I walked in there because I heard the music playing. Nice soft jazz. And I walked in because the lights were out. He had the little blue, the LED.
Yes.
I said, oh my, you could never come in here acting crazy. No, seriously, you walk in and it was really calm. I said, oh my.
Blue, the color blue is calming, the lights are dim. These overhead lights are very stimulating and not in a good way. Not in a good way at all. Yes, ma'am.
I was just thinking too, depending on what side of the building that you're on, how the sun is on, but if there's a lot of sun that comes into your classroom, like cut the lights off. Right?
Yes.
Just right. If you can, just enough sunlight just to come in because I think that also balances it out. Like the sunlight is kind of waking you up, but in a calm way.
Yes.
Right? But you still can focus and probably I think the students bring that to your attention. Like,
Yes.
We're doing this so we can be ready for the day.
Right.
Or something, or just especially after class.
Right. Definitely. And I like that too because that also helps our circadian rhythm. We're so out of sync with the sun, right? And so if we turn those lights off sometimes and just use sunlight, that helps. I'm so glad that you came. Thank you. Yes.
This workshop for as a part of the PD, professional development in the school district, not necessarily working anywhere. Has anybody had the wisdom to bring you in?
Well, I worked with a charter school, Great Oaks. Okay, yes, I did do a trauma-informed piece for them. Some of this was a segment in that, but that was a much larger project that I was doing. I also, for the Newark Public Schools, I did a trauma-informed, it wasn't this specific type of thing, but I did do a trauma-informed presentation. It was open to all staff. It was for an entire week. So I just did the same presentation for a week, giving people, opportunities to come in. But
It is professional development, helping staff to understand how to maximize the environment, de-escalate their tension and the students' tension.
Yes.
It's so content-driven, and the inside the affective domain, and this is all effective, whether you're ready for the conversation.
why did you retire? We need you. We need you. I understand. Wow. But thank you. And I would be happy to, doing the trauma-informed work that I do, my heart really is in the schools. I work with police. I've worked with Beth Israel Hospital. And I work with different organizations, but I really want to get into the schools more because, to me, when you tap into the schools, you're not just impacting students, you're impacting homes, families, communities, right? So to me, that is a critical piece. I think you was a hand here and here? Okay. Oh, yours. You said, can I come? Hit me up. I have my contact information. Be more than happy to.
Yes.
We talked to her about using some of the funds that PTA can use, and that she would like to have a workshop done for the staff and the parents to go. But in her budget, this month, she has some resources, not a lot. Yeah, that's a possibility.
But when you say it impacts community, I always tell the teachers, I say, you have to remember, every student in your class, send a ripple effect out to the family, to the folks who deal with the family, to the folks that deal with the folks that deal with the family. And people will be impacted by what you do, that you'll have in a long way.
That's absolutely true.
So we have to be really, really mindful. And I think we're getting closer, more cognizant of the fact that we really need to pay attention to what we do and how we do it, and the intention behind what we do.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. And that cannot be understated, the ripple effect, right, that you have. You really can impact whole communities. So the last point that I want to make is about cultural considerations. And this is an important piece, that our environment should reflect and reinforce a student's sense of identity. That's in a positive way, right? A culturally responsive environment affirms the culture, values, traditions, history, lore of a people of that environment. So that's an important piece. And I wanted to do a little game with us. We don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to just flick through, okay? Matter of fact, I'll ask you to, I have this set up already on a Mentimeter, but we don't have to do it on Mentimeter. We'll just, I see most people have pens and paper, so just write down your responses. So I wanted to do a little game about culture, our cultural influence and environments. And so I have 3 sets of 3 pictures. So 3 pictures, 3 sets of 3 pictures. And my question to you is, which environment is most neutral out of the 3 pictures? Okay, which is most neutral? Ready? So here's the first set. This is A, 1A, 1B, 1C. If you want me to do it again, I can. Which one is most neutral? That's C, that's B, that's A. 1A, 1B. So just write it down, because I want to go through all 3 of them. All right? And then the second group, so this is the second group of pictures. Which one is most neutral? 2A, 2B, or 2C? Most neutral. That's C, that's B, and that's A. And then the third set, I'm not there yet, that's still 2. This is the third set of pictures. Is it A? This is 3A, 3B, or 3C? Which one is most neutral? Well, I'm not, this is it would show up if you did it on the Mentimeter. But what did we come up with the first set of pictures? Which one would you say is the most neutral? 1A, B, or C?
I said A.
I heard A?
I changed mine. I said C at first, then I went to A.
Okay.
I say none of them.
Okay, hold that. Okay, and then what about the second set? I heard A and B mostly for the first. B for the second set. Okay, C.
And again, I
None of them, okay? And the third set, I heard, see, that was a variety. The third set, which ones? A. Okay, Kalina, right?
Yes.
I remember you. Okay, so you coming in here, and what are you saying no, none of them for? Talk to us.
Because I feel like even the last one, right? Our culture, the culture of academics, right? Was something that was proper in those classes, put both of those slides in.
Okay.
So one may have been African, the other might have been a little Latin or Mediterranean, but then that third one, that's the culture as well, right? And some of us, we represent all of those things, so how do we mix and meld? Because what I'm thinking about, like even my office at school, I need to put more Latin images in with my thing. Either I need to do no page or incorporate everyone so that everyone, sees themselves in things.
So I was thinking, because what I said to her, because I'm a social worker, right? She said, no, I said, y'all know that. But I think so, teachers us to be more cultured. When I was thinking culture, I was thinking that all different cultures are in the one. So we were kind of thinking opposites.
Okay. Yeah.
more inclusive, right? And she's saying, really, how can we be neutral? Because if you have any culture, if I'm hearing you correctly, like if you have any culture or anything representing other culture, it's really not neutral.
Right. Okay.
I don't know which, y'all psychologists, that's
I got you. Well, I guess great minds think alike, because really there is no such, that was a trick question. There is no such thing as a neutral environment, right? We may think their environment is neutral. We're in a room right now. We don't see many pictures. You don't see a whole lot of things, but this is a very European environment. If the same thing was set up in Kenya, where I just came from a couple of days ago, it would look a lot different, right? There's culture here. It's represented. And so often we think that we're being culture free when we take away everything that's non-white, non-European, but that's not the case. You're still representing a culture. Thank you, my sister Kalina. So there's no such thing as a neutral environment. So we want to be mindful that everything that we put there speaks to us culturally, right? So you want to, is it culturally reflective? Right? So are there pictures on display? What do the pictures convey, right? And who do they reflect? Do they reflect people who are in that space? That's an important piece, all right? And so this is my wrap up. Final note that when we're talking about a trauma-informed environment, that we are not only exclusively talking about students. We're not only exclusively focusing on students, that we need to focus on you as well. You're part of that environment. You matter. You're, whether you're stimulated, sympathetic nervous system is stimulated, we want you to be comfortable and relaxed. Wouldn't you want to go into a teacher's lounge, right, that looks like that, to just kind of like take a break and breathe in the middle of classes? But also, not just the staff and administrators, we also want to make a trauma-informed environment with our parents in mind. Parents matter. Our parents are part of, they are stakeholders, right, within the school system. They are part of it, and we want to keep them in mind as well as we're creating the environment. And so with that said, I want to just thank you. I'm way over time, and I really appreciate your involvement. And feel free to reach out if you would like to. That's my contact information. Thank you again.